All right, so we finished up on the common provisions of a lease, and now we are at the bottom, or in the middle of page 333, talking about the statute of frauds. Do leases have to be written to be enforceable?
Yes. Yes.
Yes and no.
Yes.
If they're under 3 years, they do not have to be written. If they're greater than 3 years, the statute of fraud says yes, they do.
What?
Would I ever, in any world whatsoever, have an oral lease or a verbal lease?
No.
It's not enforceable.
Is that a continuous 3 years?
That has like the term of the lease. If the term of the lease is 2 years and 300 days, it does not have to be written to be enforceable. If it's 3 years or longer, it has to be written. All the time, I'm in small claims court, and there's always some landlord, individual, or typically an individual owner who has one rental property, comes in there and says, oh yeah, typically it's a family member or an in-law of some sort saying, yes, I'm rented 123 Main Street to them. We had a handshake agreement, they were gonna pay $600 a month. And then the other person says, no, we had a handshake agreement where I was gonna pay $500 per month. No, we didn't. Well, where's my security deposit? You never paid a security deposit. Yes, I did. Here's the ATM deposit. Here's the ATM slip of when I pulled my $500 out of the ATM. And the magistrate sits there and gives me this. And looks at both of them and is like, I have no idea what the two of you said 6 years ago. I imagine that both of you probably need to get out of my courtroom. I'm going to give possession of the property back to the owner, but I'm not giving you any money. Don't ever come back to my courtroom again without a written lease. And both of them hold their heads and walk out. Again, there's no idea, we have no proof of what actually happened, it's not in writing, but as the way the law is written, leases do not have to be written unless they're 3 years or longer. Connor Act states that leases must be recorded to be enforced by a third party. Typically when we're in this situation, a third party is somebody who's looking to purchase the property. So if you, let's say you have an apartment complex and you are selling that apartment complex, and one of your selling points is your 20-unit apartment complex is 100% rented, and each of those units are rented at $500 per month, it'd be a good idea for you as the owner of that property while you're marketing that way to record those leases. So that way, whoever is looking to purchase that property as an investment can actually go in and look and say, yes, these are actually valid recorded leases. And if you're ever purchasing an apartment complex or any other type of property where you're relying on leases, you might want to go ahead and demand that those leases be recorded. So if there's ever a situation where the lease that you were told about does not match the lease that is actually in place, that the government has a record of that. And that's that little blurb in the middle of 333. It's a lot of fun. So we talked a little bit about comparing residential to commercial properties. We're talking about the Residential Rental Agreement Act. Residential Rental Agreement Act is the law that governs the majority of the relationship between the landlord and tenant. That is a mutually dependent relationship. That means that if the tenant does not pay rent, the landlord does not have to continue to rent the premises to them. The same way, if the house is not up to fit and habitable standards or meet minimum codes, that the tenant does not have to continue to live there throughout the term of the lease. However, each individual party cannot make that decision. They have to go to court to get there. And at the very beginning of the class, we talked about duty. Really, the duty of the landlord in the Residential Rental Agreement Act is it's fit and habitable and there's no dangerous conditions. Another thing that we want to talk about is constructive eviction, and that is at the bottom of 334. It's a common law doctrine that gives the tenant the right and effect to cancel the remainder of the lease without premises if the landlord repeatedly fails to satisfy habitability requirements. This is typically done with the assistance of the courts or some other agency that is somehow government involved. Typically, if a tenant just moves out, the landlord will retain their security deposit. And then the tenant can go ahead and ask for the landlord to return their security deposit if they want to go ahead and go through small claims to do that. Then we have the law of negligence. The landlord is liable for injuries that occur in common areas when the landlord has negligently failed to maintain safe working conditions in those areas, including elevators, sidewalks, all that stuff. the injured party may be able to recover damages from the landlord. Does that apply to, let's say, if there was an ice storm and a tenant slipped and fell on the ice?
No.
Possibly. Is the land, who's responsible in the lease for removing snow and ice? If it says that all common areas are controlled by the landlord, then the landlord could be held liable. However, if you have an ice storm that happened that night and it's 6 a.m. the next morning, there has to be an amount of reasonability. Did the landlord have an opportunity? And more so, was the landlord negligent in doing that? If you had an ice storm and the ice remained for 4 days and you called the landlord all 4 of those days asking to go ahead and remove the ice, it's the landlord's responsibility. And then your mom comes out to visit you to make sure you're okay, and she slips and falls and breaks her hip, then there is a case for that. Yes, sir.
So say if there's like an apartment place, right, that has kind of like a dip in land,
It has a what?
like a dip in land, like kind of like
Yeah.
it goes down, like it's like steep, and like rainfall comes and everything,
Yeah.
and it kind of floods the front of the door.
Yeah.
Is that just by nature, or is that the duty of the landowner to clear that water out of the way?
So my thing is, my question to that is, every time it rains, is water entering into the apartment? I would say yes. And if you've complained to the landlord that yes, due to a normal rainfall, 100%, that is negligence, that is some responsibility. However, in the last month and a half, 2 months, we have had some extraordinary weather events where we've had some 100-year floods occur, and that would not be the responsibility of the landlord. Renter's insurance if there's any water damage. A lot of renter's insurance will not cover flood damage as well, so just double check if you are in an area that might be prone to flooding, take a look at that. Lots of ads on TV here recently for flood
Flood
insurance.
insurance, yeah. So what is the renter supposed to do about flood? I mean, can you get flood insurance for renters?
Yes, 100%. Yep, just double check, say, hey, does this include, will this include coverage for my personal property if there's a flood?
Oh,
That'd be very particular if you're like on a ground floor apartment. I know there's a couple apartment complexes that have real poor drainage where a lot of cars got flooded. I know right after Matthew came through, my wife was looking for shopping new cars, and there just wasn't a lot of cars available in Greensboro for a week or so. And we were at CarMax, the guy at CarMax was like, yeah, we just, like, especially minivans, we've had a lot of people come through here and buy minivans in the last 4 days because their cars were flood damaged. And he said, yeah, these 7 apartment complexes, we have sold probably the whole apartment complex vehicles because their cars were totally flooded. Wow. Very interesting. We were walking through the CarMax lot, and just about every minivan had sold, pending, pending.
wow.
It was crazy, never seen anything like it. The guy at CarMax was like, yeah, this is the best.
I know.
So that's the law of negligence. So let's dig a little bit more into the Residential Rental Agreement Act, and we talk about tenants' duty. This is kind of where we started off. Today's lecture was talking about duty. Pay the rent, maintain the dwelling, and other terms of the lease. So who's responsible for changing furnace filters, all that good stuff. Now, if a tenant does not change the furnace filter, my HVAC professional comes out and says that the motor that blows the air through the house got burned out due to a clogged filter, can I charge the tenant for that motor? 100%. Do I have any chance of actually getting that money?
No.
I was gonna say, good luck with
Slight.
that.
Say slight chance. Does that mean that I can say, hey, tenant, I'm not gonna fix your HVAC system until you pay the $350 to replace this motor?
No,
Why not?
Because there's.
you have to do
Since
duty.
you're not maintaining it.
Exactly. I have to keep that residence fit and habitable regardless. In just about all my leases now, I put in there that tenants are responsible for their own pest control. And they have an ongoing issue for them to call me so I can come out there and take a look. Why is that?
Keep it fit and happy.
Right. So I still have a responsibility. If housing, Greensboro code enforcement comes in and sees infestation of roaches, you care less about the tenant. They're going to send either myself a letter or the owner a letter, depending on which address on file they have for that property. However, I can go ahead and bill back to the tenant the charge for the pest control if I can show via pictures that it's the tenant's filthiness that has caused the infestation, not due to a structural defect in the house, such as like cracks in the floor, cracks in tiles, places where bugs can easily crawl in and out of the house.
Can you do that with ants?
are one of the trickiest ones, especially if you get those real tiny ones.
Oh, God.
They can go everywhere. Really, your best defense against them is going online, not at like the Home Depot, and buying ant gel bait. Comes in a little tube. I think Advene makes a good product. Go to like Do Your Own Pest Control or Pest Mall. You can buy, if you use it in your own house, I believe you can buy professional quality pest control products and use it in your own house.
Oh,
So, the gel stuff there, you can go around the house with a tube of caulk and seal up every hole, those little ants will still find
okay.
it.
Yeah, they are relentless.
You really can. But it's more like the mices, the rats, the large cockroaches, those great big giant water bugs, stuff like that.
No, it's even worse than rats.
Wake up, there's one on your neck.
The water bugs are so scary, they bite.
They're huge.
Have you ever seen them under a microscope?
So let's talk about what happens when the tenant doesn't do what they're supposed to do.
And we did it in science class.
So can I just go to the house and say, okay, you didn't pay your rent, get on out?
Get your stuff and get out.
No. So let's do a little timeline. When's rent due?
First,
First, rent's due. When is the late fee?
6.
6th, after 5 days. What's the maximum late fee?
It's up to you.
5%, or I think there's a minimum of 25. What's the earliest date I can file?
The
The day
7th.
after.
The 15th, the 30th, next year.
Depending on how the lease is written, in my lease it says if you do not pay your rent on the 1st, you're in violation of the lease. State of North Carolina requires that anytime somebody owes you money, they have a 10-day time frame to pay that money. So if rent's due on the 1st, the earliest I can file is the 11th. If my lease does not have that condition saying that failure to pay rent is a violation of the lease, I would have to demand rent on the 1st and then wait 10 days after the demand, and I can still file on the 11th. So this is my early file. After I file, well, let's see, what is involved with file? Has anybody ever had to file summary ejectment papers? Got two lucky souls. Let's see, let's first of all talk about how much money it costs. To file the court papers, it costs $96 right now. Plus, I have to go ahead and employ the service of the fine Guilford County Sheriff's Department to serve the papers.
35.
You can't
So
just
that
go
is
stick 'em on
$30 per person. So let's say I have a husband and wife on the lease. That's $60. So I'm paying $156. Let's say there's 4 people on the lease. That's $120, so I'm paying $100 or $216. One person, $126.
So it doesn't matter how many people live in the house, it's just whoever's.
Who is on the lease? You got it. Also with that, I do have to come in there typically with, I think it's right now 8 sheets of paper, plus a self-address, plus a stamped envelope to get sent out to the tenant, and a bunch of other little things now too, which are required. Like, I have to show that the person is not in active duty military and did not get called away on active duty military, and that's why they didn't pay the rent. So some extra paperwork there. So then typically 10 days after that, I have my court date. So let's say that maybe around the 22nd. That really depends on the court schedule and whether there's 1 or 2 weekends that fall on that. So I have my court date. What happens at court? Anybody ever got the great pleasure of being in small claims court?
Oh, you two like this. So surprised.
You never know what's going to happen in small claims court. You could walk in there, you could be first on the docket, the tenant doesn't show up, you stand up there and say, yes, judge, I would like for you to make a judgment based on the pleadings, which means you don't want to say anything else, you just want the judge to look over the paperwork that you filed and say, and the judge will say, yes, I'll grant you possession of your property back, have a great day. I'm in and out of the courtroom, in and out, maybe it takes me 15 minutes. Other times I'm in there, normally in Greensboro, there is a 9 a.m. and a 2 p.m. session. In High Point, there is only a 10 a.m. session. You can go in there and you can be there waiting for 2.5 hours. And guess what you don't get to bring into court with you?
Food.
Anything. Any electronic device. So cell phones, laptop, anything. Cannot bring it in there. You can bring a book in, as long as it is a traditional book.
Bible.
and not and not an electronic book.
But it's so entertaining in there.
Sometimes-
It was.
Yes, it can be. You never know, you get, lots of times you get siblings arguing over, who gets to keep Aunt Mina's silver chandelier. You get family members arguing over who gets to, how much they agree to pay rent to each other. Lots of times there's those companies who send out those paycheck advance loans where they send you a check, and if you cash the check, you automatically agree to the loan of the amount of the check at like 38% interest. And so somebody cashed a $75 check, and now all of a sudden after a year owes $500, and very interesting stuff. But 90% of it is gonna be landlords. Every now and then you get a lawyer in there who wants to take their time and do that. And then so you're in there, you present your case, always make sure you bring a copy of the lease, the most up-to-date payment history that you have, and any other evidence that you have. If you're going to claim that there's any damage to the property in that, you need to show proof of that damage. I have yet to be able to find a way to bring smells into small claims court. As soon as I find out a way, I will get a lot more in damages. I asked the magistrate if it would be appropriate for me to bring in the refrigerator in question. He said no. He said, you can take a picture of it. I said, but that scratches the surface of my issue. It's the smell that's coming out of this refrigerator. And so you bring your evidence in, and the judge will typically give the tenant 10 days after that to pay. So if after 10 days they do not, then I can do it in my next step.
It takes forever.
Yeah.
So now we're somewhere around the 1st, I can file the writ. And that's what Megan, who works here now, used to do. She used to work at the clerk's office to accept writ payments. And what the writ is saying that, hey, we have been to court, I have waited 10 days, I have not received any money in those 10 days, and I would like to go ahead and employ our fine neighborhood sheriff to come out to the house and padlock the house.
You gotta pay more?
Another
So I get to pay more. So I get to pay $25 to file the paperwork at the clerk of court, plus $30 per person to the sheriff. Then, it'll be 5 business days or 7 days.
7.
The sheriff will schedule a padlocking.
I just remember saying that. See what they have to do.
They still don't have time to get their stuff. They might as well just take the picture.
Most
getting
of
to
the
that.
time, they've done this before. This is
Yeah.
nothing new to them.
Yeah, most of the time they already know what's going on.
Yeah,
So this is probably the 7th of the next month. We go out there with the sheriff, we padlock it. I go in there, I put my key in the lock to open it up, and guess what? Locks are changed. Then what do I do?
A lot.
The sheriff is looking out there and he's like, I've got 17 padlockings to do today. I don't have time to wait for locksmith, so I go in my car, get my drill out, and I drill out the lock. Pull the lock out, sheriff's getting annoyed with me, why can't you do this quicker? I was like, I'm drilling as fast as I can. And so take the lock off, unlock the doors. All 30 people that are now living in the house, the sheriff kindly escorts them out, and they're sitting there with all sorts of problems. They all are subleased or have been assigned. They've all been paying their money to somebody. The original tenant, nobody has heard from in years, months, whatever. Question if they actually even existed. All that stuff.
How do you padlock a house?
You change the
Every
locks.
time.
They do sell these little things that were kind of like little C-clamps that go over the outside of a doorknob. I don't like using those because those are very easily defeated by a good strong whack on the top of the hammer. I just change the locks. Whenever I go to a padlocking, I have a lock set that's with me that I have the key. And then I'll put a regular realtor lock on the door so I can get the owner or repair people in there.
Is that
Yes, sir.
cost to change the locks, is that added to what the tenant owes to you, or if you have to pay for that out of pocket?
Typically not, and that's paid out of pocket by the owner. I will typically bill that to the owner. I don't really bill too much for my time. I bill for if I have to put a new lock on it, because I have to destroy the old lock to get in. I will bill the cost of the lock to the owner. It's like $20 for a knob and a deadbolt.
So you do charge?
Yeah, and I'll put that, that'll actually show up as a damage charge for changing the lock. So the damage that they did was they put a different lock on there.
Gotcha.
But then the tenant will always come back and destroy the lock. I didn't destroy the lock, you're the one who destroyed the lock. I bought that lock. Where's my lock back?
But didn't it say in your lease that you weren't supposed to change the locks?
Yes. And, so then, we have padlocked the house on the 7th. Now, depending on the value of the item left inside the house,
Oh, yeah,
I have to wait
have to
another 5 to 7 days
for them to get their stuff out.
to get their stuff.
I didn't even know you gave them time to get
And that's too.
So
And
that's,
I'm typically always one to say it's 7 days, because what I see is a big pile of junk on the floor of the living room, where there is a value of 0 to me, has extreme value to whoever left it there.
so that gives them time to get your refrigerator and yourself though.
Yeah, that also, well, no, I've changed locks, so when they come back to get their stuff out, I'm typically present. If the house is full of stuff, I might unlock it in the morning and say, listen, you've got that, and I'll take pictures of every vehicle that's there, unloading stuff, and I said, hey, just as a reminder, the stove and the refrigerator are here, and I take a picture of it, and that way when I come back that evening to relock the house and they're gone, then I can call the police and say that it's theft, and not just a civil matter. Because typically, if a tenant moves out and they take the stove and fridge with them, and I call the police says, yeah, that's a civil matter. It's not a
Every
police matter.
time, every time.
Wow.
They don't help you at all.
But I mean, if I can pinpoint directly that the stove and fridge were here, here's evidence, here are the people that were here unloading the stuff, they did not have a right to take that out of here. I explained that to them, they did take it, that's more, the police will file a police report. They don't do anything with it, but I'll at least get a police report filed on that. They don't do anything, because it's, like, they say a stove and a fridge might be worth $300, and they could care less, but.
Do you
All right.
ever get it back? Because I know I filed paperwork and I haven't heard anything. Are they really trying to go look for her?
For
To get
what?
my stuff back?
No!
No, they
Why am I
usually
supposed-
just don't care.
I'm just never gonna get it back. Never gonna
So you
charge
filed a
her.
police report.
I did,
Do you took it, so let's back up. So you had a rental property.
yes,
Tenants were there.
yeah,
They did not pay rent.
right,
You went through this lovely
yeah.
parade of unhappiness.
The sheriff was there with me during the padlocking,
Yeah,
and,
was it in Greensboro?
yes, I was
Deputy
walk-
Lunsford?
I don't know his name, probably.
Yep.
I was walking through and I opened up, I says, oh, she took my washer and dryer. And he says, oh, that's a civil matter. And I says, well, I would like to file a police report. And he was like, oh, you have to go downtown because this isn't my jurisdiction.
Yeah, the sheriff won't file a police report, but you can call Greensboro Police non-emergency number. And then you can then wait at the house all day. So the police says, okay, we'll send an officer out. Then you get to wait at the house. If the officer shows up and you're not there, the complaint just goes nowhere. So you get to sit there at the house and wait all day for the non-emergency police priority to come out there. Put down your police report, and then that police report will just sit there.
I went downtown. I said, I got a copy of her driver's license. They took all the information. And then I says, and at first, she didn't even want to file the claim,
Yeah.
the lady. She was like, oh, I can't file a claim. I was like, she stole my washer and dryer. She was like, how do you know she's the one that took it? I said, because she was the only one there.
Right.
And she was like, that's not proof enough. And so I had text the lady.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I have pictures of all the vehicles who were there, so the police have,
Yeah, you have to have real proof. I had text the lady who admitted the washer and dryer was in her storage building. I was like, well, I have a text. She says she has it. And she was like, okay, now I'll file it. But it was like I was
did you ever get it
bothering
back?
her. That was the last thing I heard.
How long ago was that?
It's been about 6 months.
Right.
Sold on Craigslist. Yeah, she put it
It's
on
not.
like the
If
Facebook
that.
marketplace.
It's probably, she saw we stopped paying on our storage unit, and the storage unit foreclosed on our storage unit, and then
Yeah.
they auctioned off the storage unit stuff to do that.
Damn.
All right.
So what good was it to do the police report?
I don't know, what good was it to do the police
Just
report?
makes you feel better.
None. It took up my whole entire day.
So, I mean, it does nothing to have that, or taxes or nothing, I mean, you don't use
No.
it for anything.
Nope. No, you just go ahead and claim the loss, or when you go out
But it
and
won't-
buy the
if-
new,
Yeah, so you don't
Washer,
have
dryer.
to go with the losses.
no, because when you buy the new washer and dryer, that's just an expense.
So if she gets stopped for like a traffic violation, will she have like a warrant for her arrest?
I don't think they'll issue a warrant on petty theft.
Oh, well, then it did nothing for me.
I don't think so.
Just a huge waste of
I
time.
was just curious.
Yeah, I filed police reports too, just because I'm at the property and call it spite maybe on my aspect, that I'm really upset that they destroyed it. It's typically when I come back after this process and they're getting their stuff out and they start punching holes in walls and breaking windows, then I can say, okay, this is destruction of properties. They didn't have a right to be there and they purposely did that. And I'll file a police report and say, yeah, these are people who did it. And the police are like, okay, well, we notated this in the system. I said, is there gonna be any other action after this? And they're like, probably not. I said, well, thank you for being honest with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem. And they're more like, well, thank you for wasting my time with this.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, it more so, if they were to pick that person up for something else, and whoever the arresting officer is, when they're getting them in booking, might say, hey, well, you're also a person of interest on the theft of this washing machine, and unless you have like the serial number on that washing machine and they're in possession of that washing machine, then they can get it. But even if you have a picture of your washing machine and they've got the same washing machine in their house and they get arrested for something else, and you don't have that exact serial number, no. So 5 to 7 days, they get their stuff out, and that's it. So that is summary ejectment. Summary ejectment is the only legal form of eviction in the state of North Carolina. There's a couple other types of eviction that used to be a lot more popular. Self-help. So I know some of the investors that I represent have been in this a long time. Some of them told me stories, nobody that I know personally, of, Chris, back in the day, how people used to collect rent was on the 5th. Right here, you charge that late fee, and instead of going through all this, you go out to the house and then you remove the front door.
Oh.
Put a sign up that says, if you'd like your front door back, please come by the office, pay your rent, and I'll be more than happy to put your front door back up.
Good idea.
Wait, have you done that before?
Yeah.
Oh.
You can't do that.
That's a
I
self-help.
was like, whoa, yeah.
Yeah, that is illegal.
Yeah.
With a capital I. I would not have
Yeah,
a real
yeah,
estate
no,
license.
that's
Jane would not have me teaching you guys that.
I bet
And
you it was effective.
I would have a little police report out there against me, and strangely enough, I bet you the police would take a little bit more interest in that than that, and I'd probably end up in court, and then probably there'd be a couple nonprofit legal aid groups that would probably be suing me as well, and all sorts of other good stuff. So that's a type of self-help eviction. Self-help evictions are highly illegal. You can also change the locks. Go out to the water meter, turn the tenant's water off, take their power meter off so they don't have power to the house. Lots of other things, parking your car, or backing your truck up right to their front door so they can't actually open their front door without moving your car. Things along those lines are all types of self-help eviction. Highly illegal. Any damage that gets caused by that, based lack of access, the tenant can recoup treble damages, which means, let's say they were out their house for a week because of your actions, and their rent was, let's say $800, they're paying $200 a week, then you could recoup $600 of that. Plus you could also get in trouble with a lot of other groups. Yes, sir?
I'm confused as to like why, if it's your property and they're going against like the contract that you signed with them, like why you can't use certain like methods like that.
Because property owners are evil, greedy landlords, and tenants need the protection of our government.
But what if it's the opposite, and it's like somebody like who's renting from you who's like who's like not treating your property that you own fairly? Like,
I have to prove that, and my way of proving that is going through this process. That's the
So,
only way
okay.
I
So
can
if
do that.
you're trying to evict them and he's like, and they just haven't left the house yet, it's in between like the
Right.
sheriff coming and you letting them know that they're getting evicted, you still can't, you can't cut the power off, you can't.
Nope, can't do anything. Not until, really, this day right here, till it's padlocked. Once it's padlocked, then I can do what I want. But I am also responsible for their stuff during this time. So I have to either store that stuff in a secure environment, either in the house, or move it to a storage unit,
Which you pay for.
which I pay for out of my pocket.
And if you break something, oops.
If I break something, or if somebody breaks into the property during this time frame and steals their stuff, I'm responsible.
Brush roads is about like tenants who break into their own property
Yep.
afterwards. and-
Yep, 100%.
Oh,
Yep. It's really, yeah, definitely during this time frame right here that somebody needs something that they left in there. Typically, it's a firearm or drugs, and they just break a window and they go in there and get it.
Wow.
Another type of eviction that is not looked upon real well is retaliatory eviction. That is, let's say, tenant has been paying their rent every month on the 10th, which is always late, but you have, or let's say they pay on the 15th every month, which is 15 days late, and you're letting it slide. And then one day they call the code enforcement folks at the city of Greensboro and say, hey, you know what, I called Chris, my slumlord landlord, to fix my heating. He hasn't done it yet. Can you please send somebody coming out here to go ahead and get the process started so you can go ahead and I get documentation on that? And I see that, I was like, oh, that tenant's so terrible. They filed a complaint with the city. They've never paid their rent on time. I'm gonna go ahead and file this month and get them evicted because they filed that on it. That's a retaliatory eviction, even though they're late on their rent. But the pattern has showed that I have been okay with them being late on the rent every month. But because the court will see is that because the real key, the real motivation for me to file that eviction was to retaliate against them for getting code enforcement out there to make sure that I'm doing my job. That's a retaliatory eviction. And again, the judge will throw that out of court. I've also seen judges, it's not even been a retaliatory situation. If there's any code violations, they'll typically continue the case until those code violations get fixed. And so this example here, as awful as this one is, how much time it takes, this is best case scenario. So another thing that can happen in court is on the 22nd, tenant can say, you know what, I would like a continuance. I'm gonna hire a lawyer. All right, the judge will continue it for maybe 7 days, sometimes 14. Then, after that, they can come back and they say, oh, you know what, I'd like to appeal. And I'd like to send this to district court. Now, for when I file to get a date, to get time in front of a magistrate, that's real quick and easy. To get a date at district court, has anybody ever had to file something in district court?
I'm in the middle of one of those now.
How long, like 6
I
months?
still don't have a court
You
date.
still don't have a court date. And how long ago was it that the appeal was made? Or that you have to go to district?
August.
August. So that was over 2 months ago, and you still don't even have a court date. So 6 months, and so
And there's
all
still no rent being paid on the unit either.
that time.
These are people that
Um,
know, they've been doing this probably for a
Oh,
while.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
they
They're
know what they're doing.
professionals.
Yeah.
At the appeal time, if there's an appeal, the tenant is supposed to deposit the amount of the complaint with the clerk of court. So if you're saying that they owe $1,000 in rent, they're supposed to, when the time of the appeal, to perfect the appeal, they're supposed to deposit that $1,000 with the clerk of court, which still doesn't help you out, because that money is no closer to getting to you, but the tenant has to show that, yes, if the appeal does not get, if they lose the appeal, then at least you'll get that rent from the original appeal. Now, whether or not during this whole time frame where you're waiting for the court date to happen, they're having to pay the clerk of court rent, I don't believe so, but it doesn't get you any closer to rent.
So legitimately, what is the tenant trying to, gain here? Are they trying to get the
Stay
right to stay in
rent-free.
the stay
Yeah.
rent-free, or
Yeah.
just stay in the property to get caught up?
Stay until they get the income taxes, do they
Yes.
move somewhere
Yeah,
else?
usually they could care less whether or not they get to keep the unit. They're just trying to
Right.
buy some time
Right,
So they can move somewhere else.
so they can move somewhere else.
you got it. Buying time.
Can you put that somewhere so the next person that wants to rent it can see, ooh, you did that?
So I-
Nothing to it till they're out.
No, I can do an eviction search to see if somebody's ever filed any eviction papers or if the writ's ever been filed on somebody. But I'm counting on the counties where they live to have digital records, and a lot of counties still don't.
So you never know if someone has been evicted before?
I have a pretty good idea if they've been evicted in Guilford County, Forsyth County does a pretty good job, but, I mean, most of California is digitized, most of New York is digitized. You get into Virginia, Tennessee, some of those are, I'm spotty on counties. It's up to each county on how they want to handle their records. And it's the company that I use to do background checks on what access to data is out there. Because I'm not going to every county and digging through big, huge binders looking at last names before I rent to somebody. I run a report, and the report comes back as yes or no. That's it. But we'll talk about that when we talk about property management. So, Foreclosure Act of 2009. This is a good one. We're at the bottom of 336. This is if they've been foreclosed and a bona fide lease is there, then there is 90-day notice for a tenant to move out after a foreclosure. That just gives the tenant a little bit more protection. If the foreclosure, because in 2009 there was a lot of foreclosures, tenants were still paying their rent, and all of a sudden the new owner comes in and says, no, tenant, I want you out for whatever reason, and we'll give them 30 days notice, but they said, you know what, we'll give tenants 90 days notice. Security deposit. It is based on the rental rate and the term of the lease. If the rental term is a week to week, then you can, maximum security deposit you can charge is 2 weeks. If the lease term is a month-to-month lease, maximum is 1.5 months of rental rate is the max you can charge as deposit. If the lease term is greater than a month, standard lease in my world is a 12-month lease, 12 to 24-month lease with automatic renewal, I can charge up to 2 months of the rental rate as security deposit. Does that include pet deposit,
No.
blind deposit, paint deposit, carpet deposit, deposit? Yes. Any type of money that I'm holding that could ever be possibly refunded to a tenant is included in this deposit maximum. It is not inclusive of pet fees, lease signing fees, or any fees that the tenant's not hoping to get back, but any money the state of North Carolina considers to be a deposit, any money that I am holding for the tenant that they would ever have a chance of getting back from me. I can withhold security deposits for damage, not ordinary wear and tear, unpaid rent, unpaid bill, court costs, broken leases. For broken leases, I can only withhold money for the time that it is empty and the amount of money that I'm directly spending to re-rent it. So let's take a little bit more about that first one. The majority of the time I withhold a security deposit is for unpaid rent and damage. Our book gives us a nice handy-dandy chart on, or bullet points on 338 on what is damaged and what's not.
So
One of
can
my
you-
pet peeves is
I'm
this.
sorry,
Yes.
can I ask a question about the broken lease? So if,
Yeah.
say for instance, they were supposed to, move, wait. So the security deposit, if they move out without paying their rent, you
Yep.
can't apply the security deposit to unpaid rent?
Only after they move out. So after they move out, I can apply that security deposit. I can withhold their deposit for unpaid rent, unpaid bills, and court costs.
Okay.
Damage. On 338, I'm told that wear and tear is dirty carpet and dirty walls and windows. But I'm also told that damage, the last bullet point, is extraordinary cleaning due to excessive filth. What's the difference between dirty carpet and excessive filth?
Order,
A lot.
maybe a hoarder?
I think it's pretty much a matter of opinion.
Yeah.
Not even so much a matter of opinion. What can I show on a picture that taken to court?
Piece of carpet missing.
I can't bring smells in. If I could bottle up a smell and bring it in the court office and say, yes, I am withholding this person's security deposit because when they move out, magistrate, this is what their house smelled like. As the magistrate passes out, the bailiff puts me in handcuffs. Magistrate comes back to, I get out of handcuffs, and the magistrate is like, yes, Chris, that is excessive. Now, I used to be a single guy. I used to live by myself in an apartment. I was not described by my mother as the cleanest teenager, 20-something. However, the teenagers, when I was a teen to my 20s, I would not be what people would describe traditionally as neat. However, 10 years ago when I got in this business, I had one idea of what gross and dirty was. However, now, I have a very, 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 very different idea of what that is. So it's all subjective, it's all not so much what is excessive filth, but what can I show on camera with a picture that if the tenant says, no, Chris, you illegally withheld my security deposit, I'll take you to court. What can I show up to court with to show, to convince the magistrate very, very easily that yes, this is excessive filth. That's my rule of thumb. Before we go to break, let's knock out vacation rentals, which is 340. The North Carolina Vacation Rental Act says that agents dealing with vacation rentals for others must be licensed, agreements must be in writing. So remember, regular leases do not have to be in writing unless they're 3 years. All vacation rentals must be in writing. All deposits and money must go into the trust or escrow account. Houses must still be fit and habitable. Security deposits can be charged. There is no maximum. It's just whatever the market will bear. Tenants must not damage. Evacuation. Now, you can get a refund for if there's an evacuation, if evacuation insurance was not offered. If evacuation insurance was offered by the real estate agent and was declined by the tenant, and there was an evacuation, there's no, the landlord or real estate agent can go ahead and keep the entire duration of that rent. Travel agents can get referral fees. So a common test question is, what is the only unlicensed person they can get a referral fee? And it's a travel agent dealing with a vacation rental. On that tidbit of happiness, let's go to break. And when we come back, we'll talk about property management.